guys, welcome back to the Tomfoolery Motorsports talk show. So basically what we're doing today for our next episode, we're doing what some of the comments people have been asking in our comments. And today, we're rebuilding shocks. And these are the shocks for the Cracker truck. As we get ready for the 2021 season, we go through all of our shocks, rebuild all 8 of them per each truck. And today we're going to show you how to rebuild, set, do everything to build our shocks. So today, we're working on my rears, my 30-inch double bypass shocks, and we're going to get started on what we're going to be doing, tearing these apart. So we come here, and these are our basic set of tools that we use to take apart and rebuild all of our shocks. I'll go through what we have as we tear it apart, but these are basically all our primary tools to completely rebuild these. So first to start off, we'll grab our 3/4 inch deep socket. What we're going to be doing is we're going to take off our Schrader valve. This basically is where we set our nitrogen to. And the nitrogen goes in through this side off of the Schrader valve. And there's a piston in here on the accumulator side of our shock where the nitrogen sits on top of the puck and all of our fluid is on the bottom and through the entire rest of our shock. So we're going to start by taking the Schrader valve off, and we'll work on going from there. Once we got that apart, we're going to take our shock guards off. Basically, this keeps, if anything happens and this shock cap blows off, this will pull it together, keep it from blowing off. So we're going to take this off, and then we're going to take our shock cap off. Now that we got our shock cap off, we always like to make sure and check our puck. If we see any fluid, we usually have to change the seals, but as we can see right now, there's not any fluid. So we know that the shocks aren't bypassing, which means those seals are good. So we'll clean up the top surface and we'll start pulling the rest of the shock off to drain all of our hydraulic fluid out of them. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set our shocks. We're going to pull our shock shaft out, fully extend it. We're going to clamp it so we don't have the shock slide back in when we take this cap off to pull our shock shaft out. And we will unscrew this cap.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber.
Get the shock shaft out the side, and then we will start draining all the fluid to clear out everything in the shock. So what we have here is our fully built shock shaft with our bump stops and our shock cap and all of our shims. So basically we have a set of shims for rebound and compression. Basically we have a top set of shims that will adjust our compression and a bottom set of shims on this puck that will adjust our rebound. So we can tweak them and change our different sizes of shims to what we want. If we want to do something a little bit softer landing or harder landing, we'll adjust the shims, change the sizes, and basically it'll change how the truck will land. Right now we'll actually go through, we'll pull this shock cap off, and we're going to start checking the seals, making sure that our wiper seals and our main seal is still good. If they're not good, we'll replace them. We'll check everything else out, make sure all of our shims aren't bent. We'll get this back together and we'll set it off to the side so it's ready to go back to assembly. So now we got the cap off, and now we're going to be checking our main seal here, and we have 2 wiper seals. We're going to check those, make sure if there any need to be replaced, we replace them as we need. If they don't need to be replaced and they look good, we'll keep them back in there because we don't need to replace them if they're messed up. So we'll start popping these out. We'll check them completely. If they're good, we'll leave them in. So, we got the cap apart, took a look at both of our wiper seals. They don't look to be damaged or messed up at all, so we can reuse these. But our main seal, actually here, is pretty much torn. It's got a bunch of tears in it and cracks. So if we leave this any longer, it'll basically just rip apart and the shock will start to leak. So basically we got an extra set of seals here. Anything that we need, brand new sets, we'll throw them back in, and this cap will be ready to go back on. With these, you just gotta push them in. Sometimes there's a little finesse. There's a little groove in these shock caps, and so sometimes they can be a little bit of a pain. Once you get these in, they're set in there good. We'll grease them up, and we'll be all good and set. You always want to make sure that your seal is in there all the way. You don't want to make sure there's any lips in them. We'll make sure it's a flat surface because when you go back on, if there's a lip to them, they will get crushed and they will tear. So now we got that in, we'll get our lithium grease. It's good stuff to use while we're rebuilding shocks. It keeps these seals from not getting dry. It kind of keeps them greased up. Put a little bit on here, dab some with my finger, roll it around, get a nice little bit of grease on there. And the cap is ready to go back on. This is the shaft puck that I was talking about earlier. As you can tell, we got a couple different sets of shims here. Basically, like I was saying before, these are adjusted. You always got to make sure that this goes back on the exact same way with how we have these set. If we set them in backwards, it's going to make the truck land way different. So my rule of thumb I normally do is I'll pull this off, and the bottom side where it sits on the shaft, I put that down so I know that that's the side that's got to go in, and that's the one that's going to be closest to the shaft. Now I'll start reassembly on the shock again, on the shock shaft. Basically I take my shock shaft, get it lined up, slide it over top. It'll get through the 2 wiper seals, then you just got to either push down or give it some tap. Slide it back on. Then we'll take our seals, or we'll take our shims, throw these on. Get this all lined up, get our puck put back in the exact same place we took it off. Slide it back on. Throw our washer and our nut. Okay. Don't see any lock now. So we use our big impact put these back on, you don't want to crank on them very tight because you will bend the shims and it'll cause the shims to not work properly. So just give it a good bump, get it tight, and it'll be good. So, now we have our shock shaft fully rebuilt again, back together. So I'll set this off to the side. Put that back on. I'll put it back on after. So I'll set this off to the side now. That's completely rebuilt. And we're going to go back. Now that the shock has been drained, we will go back and start finishing tearing this apart and getting it ready to be clean. Go back together. So we'll start off first is I'll grab my puller tool. Basically with these pucks, there's a little screw or a little thread in the center of this puck that you can pull out, so you can tap out this seal here because it is a pain to try to pull out. So we got a little special tool that we have made. We throw in here, thread it on. Get it tight. We'll grab our hammer. And we'll do a couple good taps up. And we'll pop this puck out. Puck is out. So now that we got this puck out, we'll check it. Make sure there's no tears in any seals that we can see. And we will throw this back together. If we don't need them, which it didn't look like we needed them, they should be okay. So this is our shock puck here. Basically, the way this sits, this is the top side. So our nitrogen from our Schrader valve pressurizes the cylinder on the top side. These seals touch the outer side, out of the walls of the accumulator shock. Basically keeps the pressure of the shock, or the nitrogen pressure on the top, and then the fluid on the bottom. So as the shock moves, shock shaft goes down, fluid goes down, puck goes down, and the nitrogen comes down with it. Basically keeps the shock fluid and the nitrogen separate. So if they do happen to be worn out and the seals are blown, you will see that you'll get fluid on the top side, which means these seals are worn out and bad, so we gotta replace them. But these ones seem to be good. They seem to still have some life left to them. We'll throw these back on, get these cleaned up, and ready to go back together. So now what we'll do next is we'll take our top cap off of our shock, pull this apart, check the seals, make sure there's no damage anywhere, and once we get that, we'll check the seal, put this off on the table, and we'll start cleaning the insides, making sure there's no debris and wiping out all the old fluid out of the cylinders. We got our top cap off. Now we'll look at this seal, and we'll see if it needs any replacement, if there's any damage to them. We'll clean this off, set it back up on the table, and it should be ready to go back together. So the seal's got a little bit of a pinch to it, where after a while they sit on there on the shock, and it leaves a little groove. That groove will eventually cause the shock to leak. This one's a little bit too bad to reuse, so we'll throw this one away and we'll put a new one in it, re-grease it, should be ready to go. Alright, so now we basically have all of our caps cleaned up, done. Everything we've checked over is now checked. Now we'll check on the shock itself. Now we'll go through it, check everything in here, see if there's any nicks or any unusual wear inside the shocks. We'll clean them all out, and we'll start reassembling. So now everything's been cleaned up. We looked in there. There's no any scarring or nicks or anything in the shocks. So now what we'll do is we'll start throwing these back together and we'll start assembly. Ellie?